The safe cracked open at 2:47 in the morning, and that was the exact moment Elena Voss's life ended and began again. She didn't hear him behind her. She didn't hear anything except the soft click of tumblers falling into place, the sound she'd practiced 10,000 times on a cheap training lock in her apartment. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was slow. Everything about her had been trained for this one night, this one theft, this one desperate act to save the only family she had left. Then a voice, low and unbothered, cut through the dark. "You're better at that than most men I've hired to do it." Elena spun, and the gun in her waistband was in her hand before she'd finished turning. But he was already there, close, closer than a man should be able to get without a sound, and he didn't flinch at the barrel pointed at his chest. Dante Marchetti didn't need to flinch. Men who pointed guns at him rarely left the room standing. He was tall in the way that made a room feel smaller, dressed like he'd stepped out of a boardroom rather than out of bed at 3 in the morning to catch a thief in his own home. Dark hair, darker eyes, a scar above his left eyebrow that told a story he'd never share. He looked at Elena the way a man looks at a puzzle he wasn't expecting to enjoy solving. "Move and I'll shoot," Elena said. "You won't. Try me." "I already have 3 of my men outside that door," Dante said, nodding toward the hallway without ever taking his eyes off her. "You'd get 1 shot, maybe 2, and then you'd never get back to whoever it is you're doing this for." Elena's jaw tightened. He'd found the exact nerve, and he hadn't even tried. "How do you know I'm doing this for someone?" "Because women like you don't rob mafia vaults for sport." His eyes moved, slow and deliberate, from her face to the half-open safe behind her, to the velvet case she'd already pulled free. "You're not a professional, you're desperate, and desperate people only ever steal for one reason." She said nothing. That was answer enough. Dante crossed his arms, and for a long moment the two of them simply stood there, thief and boss, gun and silence, while somewhere in the city a clock kept ticking toward a deadline Elena couldn't afford to miss. "Here's what's going to happen," he said finally. "You're going to put the gun down. You're going to tell me exactly why you needed $40,000 in uncut diamonds badly enough to break into the most protected house in the city. And depending on your answer, I'll decide whether you leave here alive. And if I don't believe, you'll let me go either way." "Then you die not knowing," Dante said simply. "Your choice." Elena's hand trembled, just slightly, just enough for him to see it. And that was the moment she made the calculation every cornered person eventually makes. That talking bought time, and time was the only currency she had left. "My brother," she said. "He owes money to people who don't forgive debts, people far less patient than you." "Who?" "The Kozlov family." Something shifted in Dante's expression, not surprise but recognition, the particular stillness of a man filing away a name he already hated. "The Kozlovs don't forgive debts. They collect body parts instead." "I know," Elena said, and her voice cracked for the first time. "Which is why I'm standing in your house with a gun in my hand, instead of sleeping in my own bed like a person with a normal life." Dante studied her for a long moment. Then, without a word, he reached out and pushed the barrel of her gun downward with 2 fingers, as easily as closing a door. Elena let him. She didn't know why. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the way he'd said your choice, like he actually meant to give her one. "Put that away," he said. "You're not shooting anyone tonight." "Why do you care?" "I don't," Dante said. "But I've been looking for a reason to burn the Kozlovs to the ground for the last 2 years, and you just handed me one wrapped in a bow." What Elena didn't know, what she wouldn't learn until 3 days later, curled in the guest wing of Dante's estate with an ice pack against a bruised wrist, and a debt she never asked for hanging over her head, was that the diamonds she'd tried to steal were never meant to leave that house. They were bait. A trap Dante had set for a rival he'd been hunting for months, using a network of informants and false leaks designed to draw out exactly the kind of person desperate enough to try. He hadn't expected the person to be her. He hadn't expected the small, brutal kindness in the way she thanked the housekeeper for bringing her tea. He hadn't expected the fire in her when she demanded, day after day, to know what was happening to her brother. He hadn't expected to find himself standing outside her door at midnight more than once, telling himself it was strategy, telling himself it was leverage, telling himself anything except the truth, that he wanted to see her face again before he slept. Elena, for her part, hated him, or told herself she did. She hated the way he moved through his own house like he owned the air in it. She hated the calm, unbothered certainty with which he discussed men's lives being ended over dinner, the way he could go from ruthless to gentle in the space of a single sentence. She hated, most of all, the fact that 4 nights into her captivity, she caught herself waiting for the sound of his footsteps in the hallway. "You're starring," Dante said one evening, not looking up from the papers spread across his desk. "I'm plotting your murder," Elena said. "It requires focus." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "Line up behind the Kozlovs." "Where's my brother?" "Alive," Dante said, finally looking at her. "For now. My men found him 2 nights ago, half drunk in a bar in the East District, completely unaware that his sister had broken into a Mafia Don's house to save his life." Elena's stomach dropped. "You know where he is and you didn't tell me." "I'm telling you now." "That's not the same thing." "I needed to know I could trust you before I gave you anything to act on," Dante said, standing, closing the distance between them with the same unhurried certainty he did everything. "You're not what I expected, Elena Voss. You don't know anything about me. I know you didn't run when you had the chance. I know you've spent every night in this house asking about your brother before you ask about yourself. I know most people who come through my door are trying to take something from me." His voice dropped, quieter now, rougher at the edges. "You're the first one in a long time who made me want to give something instead." The air between them went thin and dangerous. Elena felt it the way you feel a storm before it breaks, the pressure change, the stillness, the certainty that something was about to happen that couldn't be undone. "Don't," she whispered, though she didn't step back. "Don't what?" "Don't make me feel anything for you. I don't have room for it, not with everything." He kissed her before she finished the sentence, and every reasonable argument she'd built against him collapsed in an instant. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was the kiss of 2 people who had been circling each other with knives for days, both too proud, too guarded, too scared of what wanting the other person might cost them. When they finally broke apart, Elena's hands were fisted in his shirt, and Dante's forehead rested against hers, both of them breathing like they'd run a mile. "This changes nothing," Elena said. "It changes everything," Dante answered, "and you know it." The Kozlovs came for blood 3 nights later. They came in force, 6 cars deep, cutting the power to the estate before breaching the gates, a level of coordination that told Dante immediately this wasn't a random act of retaliation. Someone had given them a way in. Someone inside his own walls had sold him out. Elena was in the East Wing when the first shots rang out, and every instinct in her body screamed to run. But running meant leaving Dante's men to fight alone, and it meant leaving him alone, and somewhere in the last 5 days, without her permission, that had stopped being an option she could live with. She grabbed the gun she'd hidden beneath her mattress the night she arrived. Because a girl who had survived on nothing but instinct her whole life never truly disarms, and moved toward the sound of the fighting instead of away from it. She found Dante in the west hallway, pinned behind an overturned table, blood soaking through the shoulder of his shirt, 3 Kozlov men closing in from the stairwell. "Elena, get out." "No," she said, and put 2 bullets into the nearest man before he finished the sentence. The fight that followed felt like it lasted an hour and a lifetime all at once, gunfire and shouting, and the particular silence that falls right after a bullet finds its mark. When it was finally over, when Dante's men had cleared the last of the Kozlov soldiers from the property, Elena was the one kneeling over him, hands pressed hard against the wound in his shoulder, refusing to let go even as his own men tried to move him. "You came back for me," Dante said, his voice thin with pain and something that looked impossibly like wonder. "Shut up and stay alive," Elena said, her voice breaking. "You don't get to die on me now, not after everything." "Since when," he managed, a weak laugh catching in his throat, "do you care whether I live?" Since the moment you kissed me and ruined my entire plan to hate you, Elena said, tears finally spilling over. So don't you dare leave me here to explain that to myself. He survived. Of course he survived. Men like Dante Marchetti didn't build empires by dying easily. But something had shifted in the wreckage of that night, something neither of them tried to deny anymore. 3 weeks later, Elena's brother stood freshly cleared of debt, alive and safe under Dante's protection. The Kozlov threat dismantled piece by piece in the aftermath of their failed attack. Elena herself stood in the doorway of Dante's study, watching him work, no longer a prisoner, no longer a thief, no longer certain of what exactly she was to him now except that she couldn't imagine leaving. You could still walk away, Dante said without looking up, as if he'd read the thought straight off her face. Your debt's cleared, your brother's safe, nothing's keeping you here anymore. Elena crossed the room, took the pen from his hand, and set it down with quiet finality. You're wrong, she said. There's one thing keeping me here. And what's that? She leaned down, close enough that her next words landed like a vow instead of an answer. I broke into your house to save my brother's life, Elena said. I'm staying to save yours. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to the war that had almost swallowed it whole, indifferent to the two people standing in that quiet study who had found, in the wreckage of betrayal and blood, something that felt unmistakably like home. Some love stories begin with flowers. Theirs began with a broken lock, a loaded gun, and a man who decided, in the space of a single heartbeat, that some things were worth protecting, even the woman who'd come to rob him blind. If this story kept you hooked, hit that like button and subscribe for more mafia romance sagas every week. Let me know in the comments, would you have trusted Dante or run the second you had the chance?